tell me, why are so many people against Israel, and what can we do about it? You're the psychiatrist here.
Well, I think part of it is the politics of envy. The Jews are the perennially successful minority. Even in the story of Exodus, the reason that the Pharaoh rises up against the Jews is because they're disproportionately successful in Egypt, even though the Egyptians were beholden to them not long before that. They're disproportionately successful. Okay, so...
Joseph helped Egypt thrive.
Right, absolutely. So part of that narrative is that the influx of Jews was actually of great utility to the Egyptian population. But then the Jews became disproportionately successful. And that always happens. It always happens. And so then the issue is, well, what do you do with the disproportionately successful? And the response to that is twofold. You can be happy for the fact of their productivity and their success because they share their knowledge and their abilities with everyone around them, and the rising tide lifts all boats. Or you can decide that anybody who has more took it and is a thief and a crook. And there's always corruption in every enterprise, so there's always things you can point to. So what I see is that the Jews are also the perennial canary in the coal mine. When societies take a turn against those who are successful and start to define them as criminals, the Jews are the first people to be targeted. And all that indicates is that all the successful...
That's more in socialist type societies or communist societies anti-Semitism also thrived when Jews were miserable and unsuccessful. So we weren't always, not in every pocket were we successful, and yet it's everywhere.
There's also the mere fact that ethnic differences can easily be inflamed, and that people are radically, we're relatively insular by our psychology. It's me, and then it's me and my family, and then it's me and my family and my community.
That's right.
Right. It's harder for us to extend that ethos of concern as people get more distal,
which makes sense, by the way.
Well, of course it does, because something has to mediate in-group identity, or we wouldn't be social, right?
Obviously, I care more about my child than a stranger, right? I mean,
right. And you might say, well, you shouldn't because there's no logical reason. And the right rejoinder to that is, well, I don't have infinite resources.
That's right.
I can't care for every child in the world with the same intensity as I would for my own child because there's too many of them and too little of me. So I'm going to be local.
What do you think we can do? Because, sometimes I'm flabbergasted. I'm always interviewing at CNN, BBC and all that. And I feel sometimes I'm barely moving the needle. And the reality is so different than what we're portrayed. And what do you think we can do about it?
Well, I think going after the victim-victimizer narrative is a good long-term strategy because it's extremely pathological. And so to the degree that we've been messaging around this, that's in various enterprises that I'm involved in, that's what been one of our primary targets of concern. There's something wrong with the politics of envy. If you divide the world up into oppressor and oppressed, and now you're good merely because you are on the side of the oppressed, or are an ally, that's just too simple a moral equation.
Yeah.
And there's every bit of reason for skepticism in relationship to that. But it's also very bad for you to regard yourself as a victim.
Horrible.
Because you lose agency and you lose hope and you're subject to someone else's whim.
It's so funny, my dad, may rest in peace, Jim Bennett, he was raised not far from here in San Francisco. And I guess the biggest thing I took from him was he never whined, he never complained, and it was self-reliance. That's he always faced whatever situation and took responsibility. He didn't talk about it. He just did it.
Well, one of the things you
that
see
is so deeply ingrained in me. And that's why when I see, whiners, and not to say that there isn't discrimination.
There's plenty of suffering and discrimination.
Yeah. And there's discrimination and people don't have the same starting point, but it's such a... How will it be able to sustain itself, this ultra-progressive movement, if they manufacture people who are designed to not take responsibility?